Cześć. Zapraszam Was na drugą część mojej rozmowy z perkusistą zespołu 10 Years After, czyli z Riciem Lee. W tej części Ric opowiedział mi m.in. o kulisach występu 10 Years After na legendarnym festiwalu Woodstock w 1969 roku od nieco innej perspektywy. O występie Rica z gitarzystą znanym z zespołu Mr. Big, czyli z Paulem Gilbertem w 1991 roku na koncercie w hołdzie Jimiemu Hendrixowi. O propozycji, jaką otrzymał Ric od managementu Richiego Blackmora, która dotyczyła dołączenia do zespołu Rainbow. Skąd wziął się pomysł na utwór I'm Going Home i co ma on wspólnego z zespołem Fleetwood Mac. O tym, jak wyglądało jego spotkanie z Cosim Powellem, z którym się przyjaźnił tuż przed tragiczną śmiercią Powella w 1998 roku. Jak zwykle zachęcam Was do subskrybowania, lajkowania, obserwowania mojego kanału na YouTubie Vintage Music Geek, bo już niebawem pojawią się na nim kolejne moje rozmowy z legendami muzyki rockowej. A tymczasem zapraszam Was na drugą odsłonę mojej rozmowy z Riciem Lee. Miłego oglądania.
We always talk about Woodstock, this legendary festival. There is also always talking that it's something amazing. You also talk about it many times. But do you have any disappointings? I mean, any reason that you would be not very happy with the things going on Woodstock? I mean, there is always you always remember about happy things of this festival, but anything that for some reason wasn't happy with some stuff, disappoint you for some reason.
No, I mean it was an amazing time. I suppose the only thing that was a bit on there was how the hell we were going to get out of there when we'd finished playing, because all the roads were jammed. People had just left the roads were strewn with cars, and people just left them. And you couldn't get through. The nearest you could get was 6 miles from the site, and we all went in by helicopter. Because you couldn't drive in. So and that's when you flew over the site. It's absolutely incredible to see that. It's a real gobsmacking, as we call it, gobsmacking experience. You get to fly in and see all that number of people there. It wasn't actually that very well organised, I don't think. Well, they wouldn't have got a license to put it on nowadays. Health and safety. There was nothing really for that. Well, one of the other things, I guess we flew in by helicopter, as I say, and when we got there, we got a bit hungry because we left St. Louis at about 6 that morning and flown down to JFK, or it might have been the other airport. Anyway, we flew to New York, and 2 cars picked us up, and it was a 2-hour drive up to the Woodstock site. And as I say, you couldn't get within 6 miles of the place anyway, which is why we went in from the hotel. There was a hotel there, which became known as Tranquility Base. It was just a Holiday Inn, and the helicopter site was just up the road from there, and we got the helicopter and flew in from there. But when we got there was everything was fine actually when we got there, because the weather was great. So I sat on the stage with my first wife was with me then. We sat on the stage and watched Joe Cocker's set, which was really good, fantastic. The band were red hot, were really good. And Joe, of course, was Joe. He was there was nobody else like Joe. It was fantastic. Then not long after that, there was a violent electrical storm, with thunder, lightning, and there was no cover on the stage apart from 2 bits of tarpaulin just flapping in the breeze. So the whole of the stage became live, all the electrics, because there was nothing covering them. So with all the water and everything, it was a good 2 hours before they could get the stage dried out. And consequently, backstage, there was no facilities to cook because, again, all the electricity had been knocked out. And we'd flown in with a medic, and he said, whatever you do, don't drink anything that isn't in a sealed can, and don't eat anything that's not been cooked, because we could have, we've got hepatitis breaking out, we could have an epidemic. So, you know, we didn't. They did actually bring some bottles of water. I think Bill Graham organised that. He turned up at that point, and yeah, there was bottles of water for us, but that was it. You know, nothing to eat. And the last time we'd eaten was on the plane in the morning, flying down to New York. So anyway, we did the set, and then we couldn't get out of there. There seemed to be no way out. But I found a limo driver. And he said, well, if you can find a way out of here, I'll take you. He said, because I want to get the hell out of here as well. You know, it was in the backstage area. So I don't know what to do. And in the meantime, the other guys were all smoking dope and getting out of their heads. And anyway, I found a state trooper on his horse. And he was very good, very, very understanding. And I said, is there any way out of here? He said, well, yes, there is. And he said, and I can show you, but you have to be very careful because there's people asleep in between the tents. You know, you've got to be careful not to catch the guy ropes, you know, that hold the tents up, you know, with the wheels of the car. You know, you just got to be really careful how you go about it and follow me where I'm leading. So I went back to where the car was, and I said to the guy, we've, you know, found a way out. We've got to follow this state trooper. The guys were, you know, the band were paranoid that the trooper was going to arrest them for smoking dope. And I said, don't be stupid. I said, if he's doing that, he's going to have to arrest 300,000 smoking dope. So anyway, there was a second limo stuck. And so he wanted to follow. So we had two cars, which was good. And we followed the trooper. And as I say, we had to keep stopping and waking people up and asking them to move over a little bit, you know, so we could get through between the tents. Anyway, we made it. And we got out onto the main road, and the trooper said, right, go that way about 6 miles, and you'll find the hotel. And the drivers luckily knew where it was. So anyway, we arrived at the hotel, and I honestly can't remember what time it was. It must. We went on at 10, so it must have been after midnight. Actually, I remember. Yes, it was, and I know why. I just remembered why. So when we got to the hotel, we went in, and everybody was starving, hungry, and they said to the guy at the desk, do you have a restaurant here? And he said, yeah, it's up the hall. And they all went running off. And I waited, and I said, and because the next thing he said, but it's not open. So they all rushed off to this restaurant, which was shut. He said, but there is one up, go out in the street and you'll see a light up the top of the street. And that's a restaurant, and they're open near enough all night. So, okay, great. So we ran up there, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning. And I remember that because of the time we arrived at the restaurant. And we walked in. There was about 10 of us because there was crew with us, you know, and hangers on. My wife, Alvin's girlfriend, so on and so forth. The girl said, "How many of you?" I said, "Well, there's about 12 of us." She said, "Oh, okay, I'll put the tables together." So she pushed all the tables together, and she said, what do you want?" And we said, "Everything." We were just so hungry. Anyway, she got the food for us, and we set off. We got into New York at about 4 in the morning. We had hotels booked, but they sold the rooms because we were so late. We did manage to find another hotel, and we were off to Baltimore the next day. So we got a small amount of sleep, and then slept the rest of it on the drive down to Baltimore. So that was Woodstock. You know, that's a couple of sides of it, I think. It was Fleetwood Mac at that time. We were touring with them in Scandinavia. We did quite a few tours together, actually. and got on famously. But they always finished their set with "Shake Your Moneymaker," which was a really sort of up-tempo shuffle, as we call it. And Jeremy Spencer was a fantastic slide guitarist, so he used to do his slide solo in that as well. And it really went down a storm, and it was very difficult to follow. Anyway, Alvin called a rehearsal one of the dates, which is unheard of. He never went to sound check, and he never called rehearsals in the middle of a tour either. Anyway, he did this day, and he said, "I've got a new song I want to try out," and it was "I'm Going Home." And he'd written it with the idea that we could make it difficult for Fleetwood Mac to follow us. That was the idea behind it. And in fact, in those days, we're a lot slower than it is now. Because I used to be able to play what's called the shuffle. Is that? Can you hear that?
Yes.
Yeah. And I used to play that with the left hand, and I played 4 with the right hand. I was playing 4, ding, 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 ding. But I can't do that now because the damn thing's too fast. There's just no way. I don't know where it got faster or whatever. I think it was when Chick and I were actually later on always sort of goad in the audience to stand up and clap and whatever, so that we went down. We used to try and make it difficult for other bands to follow us. So, but that's how it came about. And as I say, it was written really as an antidote to "Shake Your Moneymaker."
We're always talking about Woodstock, but Fillmore East, you also talk about it during the interview. And the recording of this event is, for me, for example, drum solo. Your drum solo is incredible during this show. You always said, I listened to some interviews. You said that this is one of your favorite albums of 10 years after. Live at Fillmore East.
Live at Fillmore East, yeah, but purely because I think that Alvin and I were playing together really well that the time that was recorded. There's another album. They're calling it Set 2 from Fillmore East coming out, but I don't understand what that is because I put the Live at Fillmore East together. I found it lying in the vaults at EMI. The reason it had not been put out was because we were promoting Cricklewood Green at the time, and it got forgotten about. Eddie Kramer recorded Live at Fillmore East, and it's one of the best drum sounds I've ever had. And I just feel that Alvin and I were playing off one another really well. That's why I like it so much.
Yeah, the drum solo is amazing that you play.
Oh, that's kind. Thank you.
Yeah, I like to listen to this live album. It's just.
Well, I think it's changed a bit nowadays.
Sorry?
I think it's changed a bit since I did it at Fillmore East.
Why you hadn't decided to continue band after you reformed in 1983 when you played at Reading Festival? You hadn't decided to continue. You break after this concert and you come back.
Yeah, but that was Alvin wanting to go solo again.
Okay. So it was.
That's usually why the band stopped.
Okay.
Whenever. Yeah.
So it was his.
And I couldn't persuade Leo in those days to do it without Alvin. Because he always said, "Oh, it'll never work without Alvin." I said, "Of course it will." People come from the name and for the songs we play. If we get a halfway decent guitarist singer, we'll be fine. And eventually I persuaded him to do that, and we started with Joe Gooch. Yeah, that sadly, that never really took off. We made an album. That was with Bob Hall, Boogie Woogie player, who played with Kim. He was a founder member of Savoy Brown, Bob was, with Kim Simmons. I saw Bob actually a couple of weeks back. We still talk. But we couldn't get arrested with it. We thought we'd made a really good album. We got good reviews. Nobody wanted to buy it. Nobody wanted to book the band. So.
Oh, okay. So it's always come back to the band name, because 10 years after is always this magic name, and that's why it's always because
and the other one was the Breakers.
Yeah, the Breakers.
Yeah, I did that with Ian Ellis, who was the bass player singer with Clouds, a band called Clouds that was signed to Chrysalis.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, Terry Ellis, who was one half of the Chrysalis team, Chris Wright and Terry Ellis. Terry Ellis was managing Tull, Jethro Tull, and he also quite liked Clouds, and they had a good following in the London clubs. So he took them on, but it never really gelled. They got an album out, but it never really sort of happened. So Ian and I teamed up. And we had a reasonable go at it, but again, it was we couldn't draw enough people. You know, we did a blues show at Skegness, and I did that. Actually, we did that with Bob Hall as well. You know, with the Blues Project, and then we did it with Ian as well, and nothing really happened after that.
Frankfurt Jazz Festival recorded, and you play with Paul Gilbert, with the guitar player from Mr. Big. Paul Gilbert, guitar player.
Oh, Paul Gilbert, yeah. Yeah, that was strange actually. We Leo and I were asked to help him out, you know, and the band was formed like in 2 days, and we just had a rehearsal, and the next minute we were playing. And we were doing Hey Joe and all sorts of stuff like that. And then we'd said not to record it, you know, but they went ahead and recorded it without us. And it wasn't until several years, not without us, sorry, recorded without our permission. And several years later, we saw the album in a shop somewhere or whatever. And we've never really done anything about that.
Without your permission, as you said.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's where that is.
Reborn album, Croatian young blues rock artist Vanja Sky. Vanja Sky.
Oh yeah, Vanja. Yeah, she's the girlfriend of one of our promoter friends. I've forgotten his name now. Yeah, they live in a place called Neue Ruppin. It's not far from Berlin, and we played that venue because Andreas, his name is. He does some driving for us, and he also promotes a venue in Neue Ruppin, which we played. I think we played twice there, and Vanya is his girlfriend, and she's a very good singer. And she wanted me to play. Well, I think Andy got something to do with it as well. Wanted me to play. She wanted to record "I'd Love to Change the World," and she wanted me to play drums on it. So Andy came over. They were recording in Hamburg, and I'd been playing in Erfurt, which is right next door to Berlin. So Andy came over. He drove from Hamburg and picked me up in Berlin, and then we drove back 3 hours to Hamburg, set the kit up in the studio, and then recorded the next day. And I think we did 2 takes on it, and she had a very good band as well. The guitar player, very, very good. Bass player too. Yeah, so I just did the drums on one of the tracks. Well, on "I'd Love to Change the World."
How you recall working on this album? I mean, recording this song exactly. "I'd Like to Change the World."
What, on the Space and Time album, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, we recorded that in Olympic Studios, number 2. And in fact, I was ill for a couple of days and the guys decided to lay down a track for I'd Love to Change the World. And then when I got back, I put the drums on afterwards. And there were fluctuations in the tempo because there were no, nowadays we use what's called a click track, metronome. And that wasn't done then. So I had to figure out where the changes were and then play along with it. And Alvin was a great help there because it was in Studio 2 at Olympic, which is gone now. They demolished it and put a restaurant in. But the control room was about 3 steps lower than the recording room. And so and the drums were set up right at the side of the control room window. So I could see Alvin down below, and he could just about see me. And he was trying to give me cues as to where things would probably change, And anyway, we ran it through. We did what we call a run through, just to try, And it wasn't too bad, so we decided we'd take it. And when it came to just before the chorus, that's where there was a change in the tempo. So what we did was we recorded up to that point. The drums, all the other tracks were already done, and then what we did was it's called a drop in. So when I got to playing there, and then I'd worked out how much I needed to change the tempo, and then so we recorded along as if I already played the first bit, then I played along with that, and then I carried on playing after that finished, and they hit the button and you drop the drums onto the tracks, if that makes sense. And that's what we did, and I think I took two takes to do that, maybe 3, and then it was done. And it's incredible because you can't really hear the difference on that. To my knowledge, yeah. And then it became like our biggest hit, top 40 in America.
Yeah, I mean it's always on this top.
In 1970, yeah. And in fact, we recorded with the new lineup I've got now. We did a live version of it because we play it live anyway. Alvin would never play it live, by the way. So with Joe Gooch, we started to play it live, and then Marcus was very happy to play it, and so is Sam and Craig. Anyway, we did a recording of that because. There'd been we did the first concert we did with the new lineup, this current lineup, was last year. Sorry, no, we got a gig in France, not far from Dieppe. It was an outdoor festival, about 500 people, I think. Quite a lot of youngsters there, which was good. And we played, and then the next day on Instagram, my secretary, my PA that runs things for me, she said, "Have you seen this?" And I said, "Well, I don't look at Instagram, so I don't know." She said, "Well, there's young people there wanted to know what is that song and where can I get it?" And they were referring to "I'd Love to Change the World." So she said, "You better record it." So we recorded it, and a live version. Done in a studio, but it was just played live, didn't do any dropping in or, messing about with click tracks or whatever. And put a new vocal on it, which Craig did. And then we put that out as a digital single. We did 100, we've done 100, it's 160,000 units, but they're downloads, they're not physical, singles, and we were hoping that we could get a chart position with that because normally you can, but it doesn't seem to have transferred into a chart position. So onward and onward, as we say.
Yeah. Why don't you? Why you think that? Why Alvin didn't want to play this song? Because it was too, I don't know, too slow. It was ballad.
No, it was because he said it's got. He said no, it starts on acoustic guitar, and then it's electric guitar, and I haven't got time to change it and all that. So in fact, Joe Gooch, when he first did it, he had a stand made for the guitar, which was acoustic. So he played the acoustic guitar, which was on a stand, and then he could immediately switch to the electric.
Yeah.
But he didn't need to do that after a while, because you can get a sort of an acoustic sound out of the guitar and then switch the controls to make it sound electric, which is exactly what Marcus. In fact, Gooch only used that acoustic, I think maybe for one short tour or something, and then decided we didn't need it, do it on electric. And the same with Marcus. Marcus has done that, and that's what Sam does.
Mhm.
But Alvin said, "Oh no, I can't play that. It's got two guitars on it."
Uh-huh.
Biggest record ever that we had. He doesn't want to play it.
Yeah. Anyway, it's great. I love this song anyway. Richie Blackmore offered you to join Rainbow, but you said that you didn't fit to this. You said that you are not the person who they should choose, and you offer Cozy Powell. Is it true?
What actually happened was that when we finished playing in 1975 or whenever it was, a very good friend of mine and the band was a guy called Howard Stein, and Howard Stein was a promoter in New York. He put on our Madison Square Garden concert, and he had a couple of other venues that we played, and I got on very well with him. And he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I've got friends in England. I'll probably play a few gigs with them. I want to develop my music publishing company, And he said, I said, "Don't worry about it. I'll be fine. It doesn't bother me." He said, "Well, Alvin's got a tour." I said, "Yeah, we know that. That's why he's going off again. You get used to it after a while." And he said, "Well, He said, Richie Blackmore's looking for a drummer to start a band called Rainbow." So I said, "Well, I'm not the right man for the job." And in those days, we were still doing quite a lot of swing stuff, not rock stuff, which Purple had never done any of that. They were always heavy band. So I said, "I'm not the right man for the job." He said, "Well, I think you are, and I'm going to get in touch with Richie's manager, a guy called Steve Payne." I think it was Steve. Yeah. So he next thing was a phone rang, and it was Payne, and he said, "I've been talking to Howard Stein, and we think you're the right man for Richie. So I want you to go out to California. He's in California. I want you to go out to California and have a couple of days jamming with him and getting things together." I said, "Well, I'm telling you, I'm not the right man for the job, He said, "Well, we think you are, and there'll be 2 tickets." Well, my first wife was with me. "There'll be 2 tickets at the hotel for you to fly to California. Change your ticket," because I was going home I was going back to England. And in those days, you could get like a 3-month ticket, so you could change it. Not like now, you can only buy a ticket from A to B, and you can't flip and change it without paying a fortune. So anyway, I said, "Oh, okay." So the next morning, the hotel we were staying at was right on Central Park, and it didn't have a restaurant. Fancied some breakfast, so I went round the corner. When I came back, I said to the guy at the desk, I said, "Is there a message for me or an envelope?" And he said, "No, I'm sorry, sir, no, there isn't." At that point, the phone rang. So he said, "Excuse me," and he picked it up. He said, "Oh," he said, "Yes, Mr. Lee, this is for you." So I picked it up, and it was Payne. And he said, "I've spoken to Richie, and he agrees with you. You're not the right man for the job. He's been listed." I said, "Well, I've been trying to tell you that, So he said, who do you think we should get? I said, the guy you need is Cozy Powell. Because I knew Cozy. I'd met him when he was first playing with Jeff Beck when we played in Scandinavia together. And so he said, well, how do I get in touch with Cozy? I said, well, he just had a hit record in England called Dance with the Devil, and it was produced by Mickey Most, and it was on Rack Records, which is Mickey's company. I said, give them a shout, and they'll tell you where it is. Next thing I knew was Cozy was in the band. And then I saw Cozy, good couple of years later, at a pub in London, and I told him the story, and he said, oh, brilliant, mate. So let me buy you a drink.
Yeah, because he was a great drummer.
Oh yeah, and a hell of a nice guy. I saw him in Scandinavia. It was with Peter Green when Peter Green was trying to. Well, not. I don't think Peter knew what he was trying to do, but he was on some festival we played together in Esbjerg, and I said we ought to get together, and Cozy said, "Yeah, you're right. Let's do that." He said, I'll tell you what, I said, I'll give you a ring when we get back to England and we'll fix a date. He said, but I'm just finishing off a couple of things with Brian May, you know, the guy from Queen. He said, and Brian's a bit picky. He said, we have to keep redoing this and redoing that. He said, but I'll give you a bell when it's done and then we'll organise. So anyway, he phoned me up. He said, right, I've finished. How's next week suit you? I said, yeah, I'm fine. And he lived in Lambourne then, which is where a lot of the racing stables, you know, horse racing. And I said, well, I'll drive down and see you. He said, no, I'll come up to you, because I lived in Sonning, which is just outside of Reading in Berkshire. I said, he said, no, I'll come up to you. He said, because I want to give the bike a run. He had a motorbike, you know. He said, and I'll come up, and then I said, well, there's a really good pub in the town. We can go and have lunch there, you know, have a chat. Brilliant. Okay. So we arranged all that. Not many days later, he killed himself on the M4. He was in a terrific rainstorm and I don't think could see where he was going. It was a horrendous night. And he lost control of the car, and that was it. And he was on the phone, and we didn't have hands-free phones in those days. No. So he was on the phone, and Colin knew him because he'd worked with him in Whitesnake. And he said Cozy always went everywhere at too fast a speed. You know, he said that was his life. That's how he went. So very sadly, that was it.